He fired me in front of everyone. I just thanked him and walked out. The conference room fell silent, except for the hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic 12 floors below. 23 pairs of eyes stared at me as I sat at the far end of the mahogany table, my hands folded calmly in my lap while David Brennan's words echoed in the sudden stillness. Effective immediately. Ms. Rodriguez, your employment with Pinnacle Marketing is terminated. Security will escort you out. I could feel the shock radiating from my colleagues, people I'd worked beside for 3 years, people who'd seen me build campaigns that had brought in millions of dollars. People who knew that firing me in front of the entire senior staff was both unprecedented and unnecessarily cruel. But David Brennan had never been concerned with cruelty. As CEO of Pinnacle Marketing, he ruled through intimidation and public humiliation, believing that fear was the most effective motivator. He'd built his reputation on dramatic firings, on making examples of employees who dared to challenge his authority, or in my case, who'd simply become too successful for his comfort. "Thank you, Mr. Brennan," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "I appreciate the opportunity to have worked here." The words seemed to surprise him. He'd clearly expected tears, protests, maybe even anger. Instead, I stood gracefully, gathered my notebook and pen, and smiled at the room full of colleagues who looked like they were witnessing an execution. "It's been a pleasure working with all of you," I continued, making eye contact with each person around the table. "I wish you continued success." David's face flushed red. "Security is waiting outside to escort you. That won't be necessary," I interrupted gently. "I know the way out." I walked to the door with the measured pace of someone who had nothing to be ashamed of, nothing to hide, nothing to run from. Behind me, I could hear the uncomfortable shuffling of chairs, the whispered conversations beginning to bubble up, the sound of a room full of people trying to process what they'd just witnessed. In the hallway, I passed the security guards David had positioned outside the conference room, 2 men who looked embarrassed to be part of this theatrical display of power. I nodded politely to them and continued toward my office to collect my personal belongings. The truth was, I'd been expecting this moment for weeks. Ever since the Morrison campaign had exceeded all projections and landed us the biggest client in the company's history. David had been looking for reasons to diminish my role, to take credit for my work, to remind everyone that success at Pinnacle flowed through him and him alone. When Morrison Industries had specifically requested that I lead their next campaign, a $50 million account that would define the company's growth for the next 5 years, David had seen it as a threat to his authority rather than a testament to my abilities. Alina, Sarah Chen, my closest colleague, appeared at my office door as I was packing my few personal items into a small cardboard box. "What the hell just happened in there?" "David fired me. I know that. But why?" "The Morrison campaign was brilliant. The client loves you. The whole industry is talking about what you accomplished." I placed my coffee mug, a gift from my daughter that read "World's Best Mom," carefully into the box. "That's exactly why he fired me, Sarah. I don't understand. David Brennan built this company on the premise that he's irreplaceable, that every success flows through his vision and leadership. When clients start requesting specific employees, when industry publications start mentioning names other than his, when someone becomes successful enough to potentially leave and take business with them, he eliminates the threat, he eliminates the competition." Sarah sat down in the chair across from my desk, her face pale with the realization of what she'd witnessed. "But Alina, you weren't competing with him. You were making him money. Lots of money. I was making myself valuable enough to be independent. That's the one thing David can't tolerate." I added my small succulent plant to the box, another gift from my daughter, who'd insisted that my sterile office needed something alive and growing. The irony wasn't lost on me now. "What are you going to do?" Sarah asked. "I'm going to go home, have dinner with my family, and think about what comes next." "But the Morrison account, they specifically requested you. What happens when they find out you've been fired?" I smiled, remembering the conversation I'd had with James Morrison just 2 days ago. He'd been so impressed with our preliminary work that he'd mentioned wanting to expand the partnership to bring Pinnacle into other aspects of his business empire. I imagine they'll be very surprised, I said, and very disappointed. Alina, you could fight this. Wrongful termination, hostile work environment, any lawyer would take this case. I could fight it, I agreed, closing the box and picking it up. But why would I want to? Sarah stared at me as if I'd lost my mind. Because it's not fair. Because you don't deserve this. Because David Brennan is a bully who thinks he can destroy people's careers on a whim. Sarah, do you know what the best revenge is against someone who fires you to protect their own insecurity? What? Proving that they needed you more than you needed them? I walked toward the elevator, Sarah following beside me, her heels clicking urgently on the polished floor. But how are you going to prove that? You don't have a job, Alina. You don't have clients. You don't have a platform, don't I? The elevator doors opened, and I stepped inside. Sarah remained in the hallway, confusion written across her face. Alina, what aren't you telling me? I'm telling you that David Brennan just made the biggest mistake of his career. He thinks he fired a threat. Actually, he just created his biggest competitor. What do you mean? The elevator doors began to close, but I held them open for a moment longer. Sarah, do you remember what I told you about the Morrison contract? About why they chose Pinnacle over the 3 other agencies they were considering. You said it was because of your vision for their brand evolution. It was because of my vision, my strategy, my relationships, and my reputation. None of those things belonged to Pinnacle Marketing. They belonged to me. The doors closed, leaving Sarah staring after me with dawning understanding. In the lobby, I walked past the reception desk where I'd signed in every morning for 3 years. Past the wall of awards and accolades that David had claimed credit for. Past the framed photographs of successful campaigns that bore his signature but had been created by people like me. Outside, the October air was crisp with the promise of change. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, holding my small box of personal belongings, and felt something I hadn't experienced in months: freedom. My phone buzzed with a text message, then another, then a flood of them, colleagues expressing shock, offering support, asking what had happened. But there was one message that made me smile. A text from James Morrison himself. Alina heard some disturbing rumors about changes at Pinnacle. I have a proposition that might interest you. I looked up at the gleaming tower that housed Pinnacle Marketing, at the windows of the conference room where David Brennan was probably explaining to his senior staff why firing their most successful account manager had been a strategic necessity. He had no idea that in trying to eliminate a threat, he'd just created the very future he'd been afraid of. I hailed a taxi and gave the driver my home address. Tomorrow, I would start building something new. Tonight, I would celebrate the end of working for someone who saw my success as his failure. David Brennan thought he'd won by firing me in front of everyone. He was about to discover just how wrong he could be. 3 days after David fired me, I sat in my home office, surrounded by 3 years' worth of contacts, industry relationships, and carefully documented campaign strategies that belonged to me, not to Pinnacle Marketing. The silence of unemployment was different from what I'd expected, not empty or anxious, but full of possibility. My daughter Sophia knocked on the door, carrying a cup of coffee and wearing the concerned expression of a 16-year-old who'd overheard too many hushed phone conversations between her parents. "Mom, are you okay? Dad said you got fired, but you don't seem upset." I accepted the coffee gratefully and gestured for her to sit in the chair across from my desk. "I'm not upset, Mia. I'm planning." "Planning what?" "Planning what comes next." Sophia looked around my makeshift office, the dining room table covered with legal pads, laptop computers, and printed emails from potential clients who'd reached out since word of my departure from Pinnacle had spread through the industry. "Are you going to look for another job?" "I'm going to create one." "What do you mean?" I turned my laptop screen toward her, showing the business registration documents I'd been completing. "Rodriguez Strategic Marketing, my own agency." Sophia's eyes widened. "You're starting your own company?" "I'm starting my own company. But Mom, don't you need money and clients and employees? I smiled at her practical concerns, the same questions that had been keeping my husband Miguel awake at night, though he'd been too supportive to voice them directly. I need those things, yes. But Sophia, do you remember what I always tell you about taking tests at school? That the hardest questions are usually worth the most points? Exactly. Starting my own business is the hardest question I've ever faced, which means it's probably worth the most points. My phone rang, the fourth call that morning, from colleagues at Pinnacle who were just checking in but were really trying to understand what had happened and whether they should be worried about their own positions. Alina, it's Marcus from the creative team. I just wanted to say how sorry I am about what happened. The whole thing was insane. Thank you, Marcus. I appreciate that. Listen, I don't know if this is appropriate to ask, but are you really starting your own agency? I am. Because if you are, and if you're looking for creative talent, working for David has become impossible since you left. He's paranoid that everyone is planning to follow you, so he's making life miserable for anyone who was associated with your campaigns. I made a note on my legal pad. Marcus was the third Pinnacle employee to hint at interest in jumping ship. Marcus, can I ask you something? If you were going to leave Pinnacle, what would it take to make that decision? Honestly, the chance to work on campaigns that matter, with people who respect creativity instead of just trying to control it. And maybe the opportunity to have some equity in what we're building instead of just collecting a paycheck. Those are reasonable expectations. Alina, are you offering me a job? I'm offering you the chance to help build something from the ground up. Something where your ideas matter, where your success directly benefits you, where you don't have to worry about some insecure CEO taking credit for your work. After Marcus hung up, promising to call back after he'd thought about it seriously, I returned to my business plan. The numbers were actually encouraging. I had enough savings to operate for 6 months, enough industry contacts to generate immediate business, and enough reputation to attract both clients and talent. But more importantly, I had something David Brennan had never possessed: the loyalty of people who'd been undervalued and overlooked. My phone buzzed with a text from James Morrison. Alina, free for lunch tomorrow. I have a proposal that could change everything for both of us. I was typing a response when Miguel appeared in the doorway, home from his job at the engineering firm where he'd worked for 12 years. How's the revolution going? He asked, kissing the top of my head and looking at the papers spread across the table. It's going well. Morrison wants to meet tomorrow. Marcus from Creative is interested in joining me, and I've had 3 other potential clients reach out since yesterday. Miguel sat down beside me, his expression serious. Alina, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me, of course. Are you doing this because it's the right business decision, or because you're angry at David Brennan? I considered the question carefully. Miguel knew me well enough to recognize the difference between strategic thinking and emotional reaction. Both, I said finally. I'm angry at David, but not in the way you're thinking. I'm not angry because he fired me. I'm angry because he wasted 3 years of my potential. I'm angry because he created an environment where talented people had to diminish themselves to make him feel secure. And starting your own agency fixes that. How? It creates an environment where talented people can be their best selves, where success is shared instead of hoarded, where clients work with us because of what we can do, not because of who takes credit for it. Miguel nodded slowly. And if it fails, if David was right that you're not ready to run your own business, then I'll fail having tried something meaningful instead of succeeding at something that made me smaller every day. That evening, I called my sister Carmen, who'd built her own consulting practice 5 years earlier after leaving a toxic law firm. Alina, I heard about Pinnacle. I'm sorry, but also, congratulations. For getting out of there before it destroyed your confidence completely. David Brennan is notorious in this city for crushing talented people who threaten his ego. Carmen, can I ask you something? When you started your practice, how did you know you were ready? I didn't, but I knew I was more ready than I'd ever been working for someone who saw my success as his failure. That's exactly how I feel. Then you're ready. Alina, do you remember what Abuela used to say about planting seeds? I smiled, remembering our grandmother's wisdom about timing and patience. That you don't plant seeds when the soil is perfect. You plant them when you're ready to tend the garden. Exactly, and you've been tending other people's gardens long enough. After we hung up, I sat in my quiet office, thinking about the choice David had forced me to make. He'd assumed that firing me would eliminate a threat to his authority. Instead, he'd eliminated the one person who'd been making his company successful while asking for nothing more than the chance to do good work. My laptop chimed with an email from Sarah at Pinnacle. Alina. Things are falling apart here. David is micromanaging everyone. The Morrison people are asking where you are, and 3 more people have put in their notice. I think he's starting to realize what he's lost. I typed back, Sarah, what David lost was the illusion that he was irreplaceable. What he's about to discover is that the people who made him successful were never his to begin with. Are you really going to try to steal Morrison away from Pinnacle? I paused before responding, thinking about ethics and competition and the difference between stealing clients and serving them better. I'm not going to steal anyone, Sarah. I'm going to offer them something Pinnacle can't. A partnership based on mutual respect instead of ego management. And if Morrison chooses to work with you instead of Pinnacle, then they'll be choosing quality over convenience. And David will learn that firing someone to protect your position only works if that person actually needed your protection to begin with. I closed my laptop and walked to the window that overlooked our small backyard, where Sophia was doing homework at the patio table and Miguel was tending the vegetable garden he'd planted last spring. This was what I was fighting for. Not just professional success, but the freedom to build something that reflected my values instead of someone else's insecurities. Tomorrow, I would meet with James Morrison and learn whether my reputation was strong enough to survive independently of Pinnacle's brand. I would find out if 3 years of building relationships and delivering results had created enough trust to support a new venture. But tonight, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months of working under David's increasingly paranoid management. Excitement about the future. David Brennan had fired me to eliminate a threat to his authority. Instead, he'd freed me to become the competitor he'd always been afraid I might become. The only question now was whether I was ready to prove him right. The next morning, I met James Morrison at Caf Luna, a small restaurant downtown that was far enough from Pinnacle's offices to avoid unwanted attention. James was already seated when I arrived, scrolling through his phone with the focused intensity of someone managing a business empire. Alina, he said, standing to greet me. Thank you for meeting me on such short notice. Of course, though I have to admit, I'm curious about this proposal you mentioned. James waited until we'd ordered coffee before pulling out a tablet and opening a presentation that made my breath catch. Morrison Industries is launching a new division, he began. Sustainable technology solutions for mid-market companies. We're projecting $200 million in revenue over the next 3 years. But we need a marketing partner who understands both our vision and our market. That sounds like an incredible opportunity. It is. And Alina, after working with you on our current campaign, I'm convinced that you're the only person who can help us tell this story. Effectively, I studied the market analysis and revenue projections on his screen, my mind already racing with campaign strategies and positioning concepts. James, this is exactly the kind of project I'd love to work on, but you realize I'm no longer with Pinnacle Marketing. I know. That's why I'm here. I don't understand. James leaned forward, his expression serious. Alina Morrison Industries has worked with dozens of agencies over the years. Some were bigger than Pinnacle, some had more prestigious client lists, some charged higher fees. But none of them understood our business the way you do. I appreciate that, but let me finish. When we hired Pinnacle, we weren't hiring the agency, we were hiring you. Your strategic thinking, your understanding of our market, your ability to translate complex business concepts into compelling narratives. I felt my heart rate increase as I began to understand where this conversation was heading. James, what exactly are you proposing? I'm proposing that Morrison Industries become the founding client of Rodriguez Strategic Marketing. I'm proposing a 3-year contract worth $15 million, with performance bonuses that could bring it to $20 million. The number hit me like a physical blow. $20 million was more than Pinnacle's total revenue for most years. It was enough to build a real agency, to hire talented people, to compete with the biggest firms in the city. That's an incredible offer. But James, I literally just started my company 3 days ago. I don't have an office. I don't have employees. I don't even have business cards yet, but you have something more valuable than any of that. What's that? You have my trust. And Alina, in this business, trust is the only currency that really matters. I took a sip of my coffee, trying to process what James was offering. It was everything I'd dreamed of when I'd imagined starting my own agency, but it was happening faster than I'd ever thought possible. James, can I ask you something? Why are you doing this? Why take a risk on someone who's never run her own agency? Because you're not really a risk. You've been running campaigns that generated $50 million in revenue for Pinnacle. You've been managing client relationships, developing strategies, building teams. The only difference now is that you'll be doing it for yourself instead of for David Brennan. But what if I fail? What if I can't deliver the same results without Pinnacle's resources? James smiled. Alina, do you think Pinnacle's resources were what made you successful? Or do you think you were what made Pinnacle successful? The question hung in the air between us, and I realized that James understood something about my situation that I was still processing myself. You think I was making Pinnacle successful? I know you were. Alina, do you want to know why Morrison Industries chose Pinnacle over 3 other agencies last year? Because of our proposal. Because of your proposal. Because when we met with the other agencies, we talked to account executives who were clearly reading from scripts, who didn't understand our business, who were more interested in impressing us with their client lists than in solving our problems. And when you met with me, when we met with you, we talked to someone who'd done her homework, someone who understood our challenges, our opportunities, our competitive landscape, someone who asked better questions than we'd thought to ask ourselves. James pulled up another document on his tablet, a detailed analysis of Morrison Industries' market position that I'd prepared for our initial meeting. This analysis changed how we think about our own business. It identified opportunities we hadn't seen, threats we hadn't considered, strategies we hadn't imagined. That wasn't Pinnacle's insight, Alina. That was yours. I stared at the document, remembering the late nights I'd spent researching Morrison's industry, the competitor analysis I'd conducted, the strategic recommendations I'd developed. James was right. None of that had come from Pinnacle's resources or David's guidance. It had come from my own curiosity, my own analytical skills, my own commitment to understanding the client's needs. James, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me, of course. Is this offer contingent on me taking Morrison's business away from Pinnacle? Because if it is, I need to think carefully about the ethical implications. James was quiet for a moment. Considering his response, Alina, Morrison Industries' contract with Pinnacle expires in 60 days. We were planning to put the renewal out for bid anyway, because frankly, we've been disappointed with the service since you were removed from our account. Removed? I wasn't removed, I was fired. From our perspective, the result was the same. The person we trusted to manage our relationship was suddenly gone, replaced by people who didn't understand our business or our objectives. And you're not satisfied with the replacement team. Alina, in the 3 days since you left Pinnacle, we've had 2 meetings with your replacement. Both times, they've presented strategies that we rejected 6 months ago. They're literally trying to sell us ideas that you already proved wouldn't work. I felt a mixture of vindication and sadness. Vindication that my work had been as valuable as I'd believed. Sadness that David's ego had destroyed a relationship that had been profitable for everyone involved. So Morrison was planning to leave Pinnacle anyway. We were planning to explore other options. Your departure just accelerated our timeline. And if I say yes to your proposal, then Morrison Industries becomes your first client, and you become our exclusive marketing partner for the sustainable technology launch. But Alina, I want to be clear about something. This isn't charity. This isn't us doing you a favor because we feel bad about what happened at Pinnacle. Then what is it? It's us investing in the best marketing strategist we've ever worked with. It's us betting that you'll be even more effective when you're working for yourself than you were when you were working for someone who didn't appreciate your value. I looked around the cafe at the other tables filled with business people having their own crucial conversations, making their own career-defining decisions. A week ago, I'd been a successful but undervalued employee. Today, I was being offered the chance to become an entrepreneur with a multi-million-dollar client. James, I need some time to think about this, to talk to my family, to make sure I can deliver what you're asking for. Of course. But Alina, can I give you some advice? Please, don't overthink this. You've already proven you can do the work. You've already demonstrated that you understand our business better than anyone else we've worked with. The only question is whether you're ready to bet on yourself the way we're ready to bet on you. After James left, I sat alone in the cafe for another hour, staring at the contract proposal he'd left with me. $15 million guaranteed, with the potential for $20 million, enough to hire the best talent, to compete with the biggest agencies, to build something that could last. But more than the money, James was offering me something even more valuable. Validation that my success at Pinnacle hadn't been dependent on Pinnacle's brand or resources. It had been dependent on my own skills, my own relationships, my own ability to create value for clients. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah at Pinnacle. Alina, David is freaking out. Morrison's people called this morning asking about contract termination procedures. Please tell me you're not poaching our biggest client. I typed back, Sarah, I'm not poaching anyone. I'm just having coffee with someone who appreciates good work. But if Morrison leaves Pinnacle, then they'll be making a business decision based on what's best for their company. Just like David made a business decision when he fired me. Alina, David is saying he's going to sue you for client interference. I almost laughed. David was threatening to sue me for succeeding at the very thing he'd fired me for being too good at. Sarah, tell David that if he wants to sue someone for client interference, he should start with himself. He's the one who interfered with Morrison's relationship with their preferred account manager. I finished my coffee and walked out into the bright morning sunshine, carrying James Morrison's proposal and the growing certainty that David Brennan's attempt to eliminate a threat had backfired in exactly the way I'd hoped it would. Tomorrow, I would call James with my answer. Tonight, I would celebrate the discovery that my value as a professional had never been tied to my employment status. David had fired me to protect his position. Instead, he'd freed me to claim my own. 2 months after accepting James Morrison's proposal, I stood in the reception area of Rodriguez Strategic Marketing, watching my team of 8 employees prepare for our biggest presentation yet. The office space was modest but professional, a far cry from Pinnacle's gleaming corporate headquarters, but filled with an energy that David Brennan's company had never possessed. Marcus Chen, my creative director, was reviewing final mock-ups with Sophia Reyes, the brilliant strategist I'd poached from a competing agency. Jennifer Walsh, my account manager, was coordinating with our digital team to ensure every element of the presentation was perfect. These weren't just employees, they were partners in building something that none of us could have created alone. Alina, Marcus called from across the room, the Morrison people just confirmed. They're bringing their entire executive team, plus representatives from the 3 companies they're hoping to acquire. How many people total? 15, including James Morrison himself. I felt the familiar flutter of pre-presentation nerves, but it was different now. When I'd worked for David, the anxiety had been about avoiding failure, about not giving him ammunition to diminish my contributions. Now, it was about the excitement of showing what we'd built, what we could accomplish when talented people were free to do their best work. My phone rang, an unknown number with a local area code. Elena Road, Jess. Elena, this is David Brennan. I almost dropped the phone. In 2 months of building my agency, David hadn't contacted me once. I'd heard through industry gossip that Pinnacle was struggling, that they'd lost 3 major clients since my departure, that David was blaming everyone except himself for the company's declining fortunes. David, this is unexpected. Elena, I think we need to talk. About what? About Morrison Industries. About the damage you're doing to both our companies with this vendetta you're pursuing. I walked into my private office and closed the door, not wanting my team to overhear this conversation. David, I'm not pursuing a vendetta. I'm running a business. By stealing my clients, by poaching my employees, Elena, what you're doing is unethical and probably illegal. I sat down at my desk, looking out the window at the city where I'd spent 3 years building relationships that David had assumed belonged to him. David, let me ask you something. When you fired me in front of the entire senior staff, what did you think would happen? I thought you'd learn some humility. I thought you'd realize that your success was dependent on Pinnacle's resources and reputation. And instead, you've turned into my biggest competitor. No, David, I've turned into what I always was, a marketing professional who creates value for clients. The only difference is that now I'm doing it for myself instead of for someone who took credit for my work. Elena, Morrison Industries was Pinnacle's client. I built that relationship, you built that relationship. I couldn't keep the incredulity out of my voice. David, when was the last time you had a substantive conversation with James Morrison? When was the last time you reviewed their campaign strategy or analyzed their market position? That's not the point. The point is that they were our client and you stole them. I didn't steal anyone. Morrison Industries made a business decision to work with the person who understood their needs and could deliver results. If that person happened to be me, that's not theft, that's the free market. David was quiet for a moment, and I could hear the sound of traffic in the background. He was probably calling from his car, maybe sitting in the parking lot of a client meeting that hadn't gone well. Elena, I'm prepared to offer you a deal. What kind of deal? Come back to Pinnacle. Senior Vice President, your own team, equity participation. We can put this whole misunderstanding behind us. I almost laughed. Misunderstanding, David, you fired me in front of 23 people because you were threatened by my success. That wasn't a misunderstanding, that was a deliberate attempt to humiliate me. I made a mistake. I'll admit that. But Elena, we can fix this. We can be partners instead of competitors. We could have been partners 2 months ago. Instead, you chose to see me as a threat, and now you're proving me right. No, David, I'm proving you wrong. You thought my success was dependent on your company. I'm proving that your company was dependent on my success. Elena, please, Pinnacle is struggling. We've lost Morrison, we've lost Patterson Industries, we've lost 3 other major accounts. The staff is demoralized, the clients are jumping ship, and the board is asking questions I can't answer. For the first time in our conversation, I heard something in David's voice that I'd never heard before. Vulnerability. Not the calculated vulnerability of someone trying to manipulate a situation, but the genuine fear of someone watching their life's work crumble. David, I'm sorry to hear that Pinnacle is struggling. But what does that have to do with me? You know what? It has to do with you, Elena. You were the heart of this company. You were the reason clients trusted us, the reason campaigns succeeded, the reason we could compete with agencies twice our size. And you fired me, I fired you, because I was scared. Because I thought you were going to leave anyway, and I wanted to control the narrative. Because I was an insecure idiot who couldn't see that your success was making me successful too. The admission hung in the air between us. In 3 years of working for David, I'd never heard him acknowledge a mistake, much less take responsibility for the consequences of his actions. David, what are you asking me to do? I'm asking you to come home, to help me save the company we built together. We didn't build Pinnacle together, David. You built Pinnacle, and I helped make it successful. But the moment my success became inconvenient for your ego, you threw it all away. So that's it. You're going to watch me fail? I looked around my office at the photos of my team celebrating our first major campaign victory, at the thank you notes from clients who appreciated working with people who put their needs first, at the business plan that outlined our growth strategy for the next 5 years. David, I'm not watching you fail. I'm not watching you at all. I'm too busy building something better than what we had. Alina, please, David, let me ask you something. When you fired me, did you think about the impact on our clients? Did you consider how it would affect the campaigns I was managing? Did you care about anything other than protecting your own position? No, I didn't think about any of that. Then why should I think about it now? Because you're better than I am, because you actually care about doing good work, about serving clients, about building something that lasts. You're right, I do care about those things. Which is why I'm not coming back to work for someone who sees good work as a threat instead of an asset. I could hear David breathing heavily on the other end of the line, probably realizing that his last-ditch effort to save Pinnacle was failing. Alina, what if I stepped down? What if you came back as CEO with full authority to run the company the way you think it should be run? David, even if I believed you'd actually follow through on that offer, which I don't, why would I want to inherit the mess you've made? Why would I want to spend my time fixing your mistakes instead of building my own success? Because Pinnacle has resources, infrastructure, established relationships. Pinnacle has overhead, bureaucracy, and a reputation for instability. David, in 2 months, I've built a team of 8 people who are more productive and more innovative than your staff of 40. I've landed clients who specifically chose to work with us because we're not Pinnacle. So that's your final answer. You're going to destroy everything I've worked for. David, I'm not destroying anything. You destroyed it when you chose ego over excellence. I'm just building something better from the pieces you threw away. After I hung up, I sat in my office for several minutes, processing the conversation. David's call had been a desperate attempt to save a company that was failing because he'd driven away the people who'd made it successful. But more than that, it had been an acknowledgement of something he'd never been able to admit while I worked for him. That my value as a professional had never been dependent on his approval or his platform. There was a knock on my door. Marcus peeked in, his expression concerned. Alina, the Morrison team just arrived. Are you ready for the presentation? I stood up, straightened my jacket, and smiled. I'm ready. Everything okay? You look like you just had an intense conversation. I did, but it was exactly the conversation I needed to have. We walked together toward the conference room where James Morrison and his team were waiting to see our proposal for the sustainable technology launch. As we passed through the main office, I saw my team making final preparations, checking equipment, reviewing notes, supporting each other with the easy camaraderie of people who trusted each other completely. This was what David had never understood. That success wasn't about controlling talented people, but about creating an environment where they could flourish. It wasn't about taking credit for other people's work, but about building something together that none of you could have created alone. Alina, Jennifer called from the conference room doorway. They're ready for you. I walked into the room where James Morrison stood with 14 other executives, all of them waiting to see what Rodriguez Strategic Marketing could do for their business. 2 months ago, I'd been an employee whose success was seen as a threat. Today, I was an entrepreneur whose success was the foundation of everything we were building. David Brennan had fired me to eliminate competition. Instead, he'd created the very competitor he'd been afraid of. And now, it was time to show him exactly what he'd lost. 1 year after David fired me, I received an invitation that made me pause. The Marketing Excellence Awards ceremony was being held at the Hilton downtown, and Rodriguez Strategic Marketing had been nominated in 3 categories: Best New Agency, Campaign of the Year, and Entrepreneur of the Year. The invitation was formal, elegant, and signed by the event committee. But what caught my attention was the handwritten note at the bottom. "Alina, it would be an honor to have you there. You've changed this industry for the better." Patricia Williams, committee chair. I almost declined. Award ceremonies had never been my favorite part of the business, and I was busy preparing for our expansion into the West Coast market. But Sophia convinced me to go. "Mom, you've worked so hard for this recognition, and besides, don't you want to see the look on Mr. Brennan's face when you win?" The ceremony was everything I'd expected. A ballroom full of industry professionals, elaborate presentations, speeches about innovation and excellence. I sat at a table with my core team, watching colleagues and competitors receive recognition for their achievements. Pinnacle Marketing was notably absent from the nominee list. "Ladies and gentlemen," the presenter announced, "the award for Entrepreneur of the Year goes to Alina Rodriguez of Rodriguez Strategic Marketing for building a client-focused agency that has redefined industry standards in just 12 months." The applause was warm and genuine as I walked to the podium, accepting the Crystal Award that represented not just my own achievement, but the collective success of everyone who'd believed in what we were building. "Thank you," I began, looking out at the audience of peers who'd watched my journey from fired employee to successful entrepreneur. A year ago, I was working for someone who saw my success as a threat to his authority. Today, I'm surrounded by people who see success as something to be shared, not hoarded. I paused, scanning the audience until I found the face I was looking for. David Brennan sat at a table near the back, looking older and more tired than I remembered. Our eyes met for a moment, and I saw something there that might have been regret. "This award belongs to my entire team," I continued. "But it also belongs to everyone who's ever been told they're not ready, not qualified, or not worthy of the opportunities they've earned. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is being forced to prove that your value isn't dependent on someone else's approval." After the ceremony, I was accepting congratulations from colleagues when I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned to find David standing behind me, holding a drink and wearing an expression I couldn't quite read. "Alina, congratulations. You deserve this." "Thank you, David. Can we talk? Just for a minute?" I nodded, and we walked to a quieter corner of the reception hall. "Alina, I owe you an apology. Not just for firing you, but for everything that led up to it. For not recognizing your value, for taking credit for your work. For being so insecure about my own abilities that I couldn't celebrate yours. I appreciate that, David. I also owe you an explanation about why I called you 2 months ago, why I asked you to come back. You don't owe me anything." "Yes, I do. Alina, Pinnacle filed for bankruptcy last week. We're closing the doors permanently." I felt a pang of sadness, despite everything that had happened. Pinnacle had been my professional home for 3 years, and many good people had lost their jobs. "I'm sorry to hear that. What will you do now?" "I'm not sure yet. Maybe consulting, maybe something completely different. But Alina, I wanted you to know that losing you wasn't just the beginning of Pinnacle's problems, it was the moment. I realized I'd never understood what made the company successful in the first place." "What do you mean?" "I mean, I spent years thinking that success was about control, about making sure everyone knew who was in charge. I thought leadership meant being the smartest person in the room, the one with all the answers. And now I know that real leadership is about creating an environment where other people can be their best selves. It's about building something together that's bigger than what any individual could create alone." I looked at this man who'd once held my career in his hands, who'd tried to diminish my potential to protect his own insecurity, and I felt something I hadn't expected: compassion. "David, what you're describing is exactly what you could have built at Pinnacle. You had talented people, good clients, solid relationships. The only thing missing was the willingness to share success instead of hoarding it. I know that now, but I learned it too late. It's never too late to apply those lessons somewhere else." David smiled sadly. "Alina, can I ask you something? Do you think you would have started your own agency if I hadn't fired you?" I considered the question honestly. I don't know, maybe eventually, but probably not for years. I was comfortable at Pinnacle, even if I wasn't entirely happy. Sometimes we need to be pushed out of our comfort zones to discover what we're really capable of. So, in a strange way, I did you a favor. In a strange way, you gave me the motivation I needed to become who I was meant to be. But David, that doesn't make what you did right. It just means I was able to turn your mistake into my opportunity. And I'm glad you did, Alina, watching what you've built this year. It's exactly what I wish Pinnacle could have become. As the reception wound down, I found myself thinking about the journey that had brought me to this moment. A year ago, I'd been a talented but undervalued employee, constrained by someone else's limitations and insecurities. Tonight, I was an award-winning entrepreneur, surrounded by people who shared my vision and values. David had fired me to eliminate a threat to his authority. Instead, he'd freed me to become everything I'd always had the potential to be. The drive home gave me time to reflect on the conversation with David, on the closure that neither of us had known we needed. He'd lost his company, but he'd gained an understanding of what real leadership looked like. I'd lost my job, but I'd gained the freedom to build something that reflected my own values and vision. At home, Sophia was waiting up to hear about the ceremony, eager to see the award and hear about my speech. "Mom, did you see Mr. Brennan there?" "I did. We talked for a few minutes." "Was it weird? Seeing him after everything that happened?" I thought about her question, about the complex emotions of encountering someone who'd tried to limit your potential but had inadvertently liberated it instead. It wasn't weird, Mia, it was necessary. Sometimes you need to face the people who doubted you, not to prove them wrong, but to show them what's possible when you refuse to accept their limitations. And what did you show him? That the best revenge against someone who underestimates you isn't destroying them. It's becoming so successful that their opinion becomes irrelevant. The greatest victory isn't proving your enemies wrong, it's building something so meaningful that their judgment no longer matters.